Hello there, and I hope everything's going well. I hope this works today. I'm about ready to have a storm. Last time I had a storm, I lost power for something like 30 minutes. So, of course. Anyway, how's it going? I hope everybody's more stable than my particular internet. I mean power. I mean not just Wi-Fi. I mean power. Everything went out. So anyway, I've got a quote today that's, well, let me back up. Have you ever said anything to the effect of, gee, if he, she, they would only do something, then everything in my life would go better? Let's think about that. Uh, would it actually? And what does it take to get somebody else to change? If you're ever trying to get adolescents, if you remember your parents trying to get you to change when you were an adolescent, think about that for a minute, okay? So today's quote has something to do with that particular line of concept. Came from Jacob, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Broad, Braude. I'm assuming he has a PhD in psychology because he works at some place with applied behavior analysis, which is basically a psychological concept. If you don't know what it is, ask me and I'll go into it. But the quote goes, consider how hard it is to change yourself, and you'll understand what little chance you have to try and change others. Think about that now. I mean, how many times have you tried to do something like lose weight or get up earlier or go to bed earlier or stop drinking or start drinking like more water? I don't know that any of you are trying to start drinking as an alcohol. Yes, maybe you are. I don't know. Anyway, if you think in terms of how many times you've tried to make some changes and found that you might have like maybe lasted a whole week, 2 weeks, maybe, how easy was it for you to change a behavior when you said you wanted to change it? It's a behavior you want to change about you, and you have more or less full control over that. You do have control if you want to change, eating habits. You have control over what you put in your mouth. You may not have control over what food's available, but you have control over what you put in your mouth. You don't always necessarily have control over the weather or anything around you, but you have the ability to adjust for those things, generally speaking. So if you think in terms of how difficult it is for you to change you, what makes you think you're going to get somebody else to change just so you can have a better something or other? Whether that be a better life, a better working condition, whatever. If your boss would do something, your job would be easier. If your children would do something, if your spouse would do something, if your significant other would do something, everything would be better. How do you expect to change them? Or how do you expect them to change when you can't change yourself? Does this make sense? So aren't we being a little, and I say we here because I've been known to say this on more than one occasion, aren't we being a little kind of like, I don't know, is this a way out perhaps? When I start to say, aren't we being a little difficult? But then again, maybe we're looking at this as a way out, saying, well, I can't change anybody else, so why should I bother to change myself? Or are we just trying to put the blame on everybody else as an excuse for not to try and change ourselves? So if you're wanting something to change, you're basically going to have to be the person who does it. So if you want something to change at work, you need to do the change something. If your boss is complaining about whatever, is there something that you can do? Maybe he's complaining about something that you don't want to change. Maybe he's just generally a jerk and he complains about everything. That is a distinct possibility. In that case, maybe what you need to do is change jobs. I know that's not as easy as it sounds, but the thing about it is if we just sit there and accept, tolerate, don't do anything about whatever it is that's bothering us, then why complain? If you're saying something, if you could change your job, and I'm saying if, and I realize that this is a big deal, but think about this. If you could change it, change your job, go someplace else, move into a different department, perhaps, even attempt to move into a different department. Because if your boss is a jerk, the odds are is many people will be aware of that. If the whole business is a jerk, then you probably really do need to leave that if you can do that, unless they're like related to you, and then you need to really do something about that. But if you're not willing to do anything to change that behavior, why are you complaining about somebody else whose behavior you can't change? You seem to be, in a sense, at least as far as I'm concerned, basically just looking for something that you tell somebody else as an excuse so that you're not going to do something. If somebody says, well, why don't you? And you say, well, my boss is lousy, or my significant other is, thoughtless, or my children just, they're adolescents, what do you want? Aren't you, in a sense, looking for a reason not to point the finger at you and say, well, I could make a change and I'm not going to? If you wanted to make a change, if you really wanted to make a change, why don't you? Now, admittedly, as I already said, this is not easy, but it's going to be easier to start making changes up for yourself, small changes a little over time and build them up, than it is to try and change somebody else. Because changing somebody else isn't going to go anywhere. It's not going to happen. You might get them, you might be able to bribe them. I started to say you might get them to change for a little while, but about the only way you're going to do that is to pretty much bribe them. But to get a permanent change, I seriously doubt that. So the thinking in terms of, okay, so something's going on and I don't like it. You're yelling at your kids because they don't clean their room or they don't do this or they don't do that. Have you got another alternative? Maybe you do need to do something other than yell at them. And there's a whole lot of things in here that's I can't go into just in a few minutes that we've got here today. But have you thought about, talking to somebody and seeing if there's another alternative? Maybe talking to your kids and saying, okay, I've asked you to do this, you're not doing this. Can we come to some kind of a different agreement or something, and seeing if you could work something out? Perhaps bribe them, whatever, just to talk to them and doing something other than yelling, because maybe they're just not doing it because you're yelling and screaming and hollering at them. Nagging does not work, folks. I know a lot of people who think, oh, if I want somebody to do something, all I need to do is nag. Nagging does not work. It might work once or twice, but basically after a while, most of us put our heels in and says, we shut down. We don't like it. We don't want to be nagged. So your children may not be doing something because they're being nagged, and so you just may be making things worse by nagging them. Same thing goes for your spouse, significant other, your boss, or anybody else like that. Now, again, assuming your boss is not a number one total jerk, psychopath, and all that good sort of stuff. Have you tried talking to your boss and finding out what's going on? Have you tried talking to somebody else? Have you gone to maybe your work as an HR person that you could talk to? Have you tried getting a transfer to another department? What are you doing to see what you can do to make a change, to change the situation? So if your boss says you're always late, okay, so then you're always late. What can you do about changing time? If your boss says you're always late and you're saying I'm always late because I've got different things to do, have you talked to your boss about rearranging things? Again, assuming your boss is reasonable and going to talk to you, you might want to talk to him or her about that. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is when you're complaining about somebody else and wanting their behavior to change, what can you do to change the situation? Now, if you've got neighbors that yell and scream and holler and they make no noise overnight, okay, I see that. But is there anything you can do? You may not be able to talk to them because they may not. I know several people who tried talking to them and that doesn't work. But have you investigated other options? Sooner or later, I realize that this is difficult, especially if you're in the middle of the situation, because again, I know a couple of people who are in the middle of that situation right now, and they seem like they believe that nothing's ever going to happen. I have to believe that sooner or later something will happen if you choose the right specific set of issues. The problem is finding those specific set of issues. But to sit there and just complain about them being, noisy all night and keeping you up and not doing anything isn't going to get anywhere. You've got to need to go out and search for those things to see what you can find, talk to other people, find other options. So I guess in a sense it says, change yourself. What's your behavior? What are you doing? And what could you do differently? So I'm going to challenge you this week to think about how many times you say something, if only so-and-so would change, then this would be better for me. To stop and think, okay, is there something I could do to change this situation that would in turn work out better for me? You might even be able to come up with something that works out better for both parties. You don't know until you try. And again, I know this isn't perfect, but the thing about it is you keep saying that all the time and you never bother to look at what you can do, nothing's ever going to change. And if you start thinking about changing one or two things, that makes life a little better, doesn't it? Then gives you a little bit more empowerment to maybe think that you can find another reason or another way to change something else and work on making life more the way you want it to, instead of feeling as if you're a victim because of what everybody else does. Okay? You can feel free to disagree. Make a comment to me and tell me what you think. Tell me what you think if you agree with me. Tell me what you think if you liked it. But let me know, and I hope you have a good week, and I hope you give some thought to the fact that you can't change other people. The only person you can change is yourself. So hopefully that gives you something to think about. So we'll chat with you today, and I got through with power, and we will chat with you later. So Valerie out. Bye.